Picture this. A picture-perfect cul-de-sac in Oakwood Estates, Philadelphia suburbs, where every lawn is manicured like it's auditioning for a magazine, and every mailbox matches the HOA-approved shade of bland beige. On the surface, it's peaceful, the kind of place where folks wave and pretend they're all one big happy family. But underneath, it's a dictatorship run by clipboard-wielding tyrants who think community standards give them the right to ruin lives. And right in the middle of it sits the Victorian gem my grandparents built with their own hands, the house that raised me when my so-called parents decided I was just extra baggage. My name is Emily Dawson, 29, and I'm an estate planning lawyer who learned early that blood means nothing when money's on the line. While most kids got bedtime stories about princesses, I got lessons from Grandpa Arthur and Grandma Lillian about patience, paperwork, and protecting what you love. They never missed a school play, never forgot to plant those ridiculous Mickey Mouse pancakes on Sunday mornings, and they sure as hell never abandoned a 7-year-old to chase California dreams. My parents? They did exactly that. Packed up, left me on their doorstep like an old couch, and spent 22 years posting beach selfies while Grandpa fought chemo and Grandma battled dementia. Now they're back, 6 months after Grandma's funeral, still smelling like airport coffee and entitlement. But they didn't come alone. Oh no, they brought the queen of the HOA herself, Patricia Karen Vance, president of the Oakwood Estates Board, the woman who'd been slapping me with violation notices before the dirt on Grandma's grave had even settled. Karen, with her perfectly highlighted hair and that fake concerned smile that could curdle milk. She decided the moment my grandparents passed that this house was an eyesore, that I was neglecting community values, and that the only solution was to find me into oblivion until I sold. The first time they showed up, I was still in the black dress from the service, dirt under my nails from planting Grandma's favorite roses. The U-Haul was idling at the curb like a hearse from my childhood. Mom cooed from the sidewalk. "Emily, sweetie, we need to talk about the transition. Your grandparents wouldn't want you burdened." Dad was already tapping on his phone, calculating square footage like it was a stock ticker. And there, standing beside them like their personal enforcer, was Karen Vance, clipboard in hand, tapping her pen like she was about to issue a death sentence. "Actually," Karen announced in that syrupy voice that made my skin crawl, "the board has already issued 3 notices for non-compliant landscaping. The roses are the wrong height, dear. And that mailbox, well, it's simply not regulation. We'll have to lien the property if this continues." Lien the property. As if my grandparents' legacy was just another item on her agenda. I stood there, heart hammering, but my voice didn't shake. "This is my home. The trust says so." Mom's smile faltered for half a second. "Trust? Oh, honey, we're the closest living relatives. You're just the granddaughter." Karen nodded like a puppet master pulling strings. "Exactly. The HOA covenants are very clear. Properties must be maintained by responsible parties. We can't have one bad apple spoiling the neighborhood value." They thought I was broken, grieving, easy prey. They didn't know I'd spent 5 years helping elderly clients bulletproof their assets against exactly this kind of vulture behavior. They didn't know about the Dawson family trust Grandpa and I had drafted 2 years earlier. Irrevocable, ironclad, with provisions that made any HOA lien attempt look like a bad joke, and any family challenge trigger a no-contest clause that would leave them with nothing but legal bills. 30 seconds, I said, phone already in hand. Then I'm calling the police and my attorney. Dad laughed, actually laughed. "Emily, don't be ridiculous. We're family." The word tasted like rust. Family doesn't disappear for 22 years. Family doesn't show up with a moving truck and an HOA attack dog. Karen leaned in, all fake sympathy. "We're just looking out for the community, Emily. Your grandparents understood that." Oh, the irony. My grandparents had helped write half those covenants back when a neighborhood was new. They'd wanted beauty, not tyranny. Karen had twisted every word into a weapon the second she took the board seat. They left that day, but I knew the war was just starting. Vultures don't leave carcasses alone. And this particular vulture had a whole board of flying monkeys ready to do her bidding. I stood on that porch watching the U-Haul disappear, the scent of Grandma's lavender still clinging to the curtains behind me, and I whispered to the empty air, "You built this house with love. I'm not letting them turn it into their cash grab." What they didn't know, what nobody knew yet, was that I'd been preparing for this exact moment since the day Mrs. Kowalski next door lost her home to her own greedy son. That day changed everything. I switched my major, buried myself in elder law textbooks, and helped my grandparents craft a trust so airtight even the devil himself couldn't pry it open. Every Sunday garden chat with Grandpa, every late night knitting lesson with Grandma, every whispered, "We chose you, little sprout," had been armor I was forging. The house itself was a love letter. The same cast iron skillet still sat on the stove, where Grandma hummed Motown while flipping pancakes. Grandpa's greenhouse tomatoes still grew in neat rows out back. The library smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. Every corner screamed the kind of family my parents never understood. Chosen, deliberate, unbreakable. So yeah, let them come. Let Karen wave her rule book and my parents wave their fake tears. I had 5 years of recordings, medical affidavits, financial trails, and a professor who specialized in taking down tyrants. This wasn't just about keeping a house. This was about proving that love, real love, is thicker than blood, thicker than HOA covenants, and definitely thicker than whatever cheap scheme these clowns thought they could pull. And the best part? They had no idea the trap was already set. They were about to learn that the granddaughter they abandoned had grown into the exact kind of predator their greed had created. The next 2 weeks felt like the calm before the Karen storm. Fines started rolling in like clockwork. $250 for unauthorized floral height. Another $150 for non-compliant holiday lighting remnants, even though Halloween was months away. The neighborhood app lit up with Karen's carefully worded posts. Just a friendly reminder that we all need to uphold standards, especially during times of transition. Some properties are starting to look neglected, subtle as a sledgehammer. Neighbors who used to bring casseroles now crossed the street when they saw me. I stayed silent at first. Let them talk. Let Karen think she was winning. Every notice I received, I scanned, dated, and filed. Every late-night knock from concerned board members, I recorded on the security camera's Grandpa, and I had installed the year before his diagnosis. Perfectly legal, signs posted, footage uploading straight to the cloud. I wasn't emotional. I was surgical. Then came the first board meeting. Karen had called an emergency session to discuss the Dawson property situation. I showed up in my best power suit, sat in the back row, and listened to her perform. "We've given every opportunity for compliance," she sighed, clutching her pearls like they might actually choke her with guilt. "But the covenants are clear. If the owner cannot maintain standards, the association has the right to place a lien and, in extreme cases, pursue foreclosure proceedings for the good of the community." The room murmured approval. My own parents sat in the front row nodding like trained seals. Dad even raised his hand. As the closest blood relatives, we're willing to step in and ensure the property is properly managed, perhaps even sold to someone who understands the spirit of Oakwood Estates. Spirit. The word almost made me laugh out loud. The only spirit Karen understood was the one that let her control everyone else's lives while her own lawn looked like it was maintained by a robot army. I waited until the public comment portion, stood up slow, calm, and dropped the first bomb. For the record, the Dawson Family Trust, executed 2 years ago with full medical documentation, video recordings, and multiple witnesses, transferred all assets, including this house and the $3.4 million investment portfolio, into an irrevocable trust with me as sole trustee. Any attempt to lien or foreclose violates both state law and the trust protective clauses. I slid copies across the table. Also, I have 18 months of security footage showing selective enforcement. Mrs. Vance's own cousin received 0 fines for that eyesore of a shed in her backyard. Funny how that works. Karen's face went the color of cheap foundation. "This is outrageous. You're twisting facts." But the board members started shifting in their seats. One older gentleman who'd known my grandparents since the neighborhood was built cleared his throat. "Arthur and Lillian helped write those covenants. They never meant them to be used like this. That night the fines doubled. Karen wasn't done. She was just getting creative. She started random inspections at 7 a.m., pounding on my door with her little entourage, demanding to see inside because pests could affect the entire street. I let her in once, long enough for the cameras to catch her rifling through drawers when she thought I wasn't looking. I smiled sweetly. "Find anything interesting, Patricia?" She stormed out muttering about entitled millennials. Meanwhile, my parents escalated on their end. Samantha, my 8 years younger sister who'd been raised on their transactional love, started posting on a neighborhood Facebook group. Edited photos of the house looking derelict, captions about how sad it is when one person ruins what the whole family built. She tagged Karen for good measure. The comments poured in, "Someone needs to do something. Think of property values." I answered by posting the full, unedited photos, me planting roses with Grandma, Grandpa teaching me to prune in the greenhouse, the trust documents time-stamped and notarized. Then I added the security footage clip of Karen trying to open my filing cabinet. The group went dead silent for exactly 12 hours before Karen deleted her own posts and issued a community reminder about respectful discourse. But the real turning point came when Dr. Patterson, my grandparents' longtime physician, called me. "Emily, your mother's been calling the office, pretending to be concerned about cognitive decline. She asked if I'd sign an affidavit saying your grandparents weren't competent when they signed the trust." He chuckled darkly. I told her I'd already documented the opposite in the medical record. Your grandparents were sharper than most people half their age. And I noted the calls as potential elder abuse flags. I added that to the growing arsenal. Every phone record, every Venmo payment my parents sent to private investigators, every forged will they try to float past a shady notary. Professor Rothstein, my old mentor, reviewed the file and whistled. "They're not just greedy. They're sloppy. And that HOA president, she's crossed into criminal territory with these selective liens. We could take the whole board down if we want. I didn't want the whole board. I just wanted Karen exposed and my parents bankrupt on legal fees. So I waited. Let the fines pile up to $12,000. Let Karen schedule another emergency vote to place the lien. Let my parents show up at the meeting with their moving truck rental confirmation already printed. The night before the vote, I sat at Grandpa's mahogany desk, the same one where we planned the trust, and I smiled for the first time in months. The roses outside were blooming exactly the way Grandma liked. The greenhouse tomatoes were ripening. And somewhere in the cloud, terabytes of evidence waited like a loaded spring trap. They thought they were coming to steal a house. They had no idea they were walking into the moment their entire scheme would be live-streamed to the entire neighborhood. The morning of the emergency board vote dawned too bright and too cheerful for what was about to happen. I stood at the kitchen window sipping coffee, watching Karen's minivan pull up with a caravan of board members like she was leading a parade of the self-important. My parents' U-Haul was already parked 2 houses down, Samantha filming everything on her phone for her little family reclamation series. I had my own team ready. Professor Rothstein in the living room reviewing final affidavits. Detective Rivera from the fraud unit on standby. And Maria, the nurse who'd cared for Grandma, sitting with a fresh statement about my parents' 2 pathetic visits in 6 months where they'd grilled her about Grandma's mental capacity. When the doorbell rang, I opened it wearing the same calm smile Grandma used to give door-to-door salesmen. Karen stood there flanked by 3 board cronies, holding an official-looking notice. "Emily, the board has voted to proceed with the lien. You have 30 days to cure the violations, or we begin foreclosure proceedings for the protection of the community." Behind her, my parents stepped forward like they'd rehearsed this in the mirror. Mom's voice dripped artificial honey. "We're here to help with the transition, sweetheart. We've already lined up a buyer who meets all HOA standards." Dad added, "It's the responsible thing. Your grandparents would understand." Karen nodded vigorously. "Exactly. The covenants are very clear on this point." I tilted my head. "Are they?" "Because I have the original covenant notes in Grandpa's handwriting. Notes that explicitly state no selective enforcement and no liens without due process. Funny how those pages went missing from the official records right after you took office, Patricia. The color drained from her face so fast, I almost felt bad. Almost. I stepped aside and gestured inside. Why don't we all come in? I have some documents that might interest everyone. They followed like moths to a flame, too arrogant to smell the smoke. The living room was set up like a courtroom. Projector ready. Professor Rothstein stood at the front. I clicked the first slide, video footage of Karen's inspection, where she tried to photograph my filing cabinet. For the record, I said pleasantly, this is from my perfectly legal security system. Notice how Mrs. Vance is opening drawers that contain trust documents. That's tampering with private property. Karen sputtered. That's taken out of context. Slide 2. Bank records showing my father impersonating Grandpa to access accounts. Slide 3. Samantha's Instagram drafts bragging about renovating Grandma's eyesore into a modern masterpiece. Slide 4. The forge one my parents had tried to pass off, complete with a notary who'd been dead for 2 years. Detective Rivera stepped forward. Mrs. Vance, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, we have questions about fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse. The room went so quiet you could hear the HOA fines crying in the background. Karen tried to rally. This is harassment. The board stands behind me. But the other board members were already backing away like rats leaving a sinking ship. One of them, Mr. Hargrove, who'd known my grandparents forever, stood up. I move to remove Patricia Vance as president effective immediately. And I vote to rescind every fine issued against the Dawson property in the last 6 months. Seconded. Passed. Just like that. My mother's mask cracked completely. You manipulative little. After everything we did for you. I laughed, soft and genuine. Everything? You mean abandoning me at 7 and showing up 22 years later with a U-Haul and an HOA attack dog? Yeah, real parenting goals. Samantha tried one last Hail Mary on her live stream. Everyone, you're seeing this. She's stealing our inheritance. The comments rolled in so fast the phone started glitching. That's not inheritance. That's a trust you tried to break. HOA Karen just got fired on camera. Well, call the real police. Detective Rivera cuffed Karen first. Selective enforcement, tampering, and conspiracy charges. My parents followed for the forgery attempt. The movers who'd been waiting outside suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. I stood on the porch watching the police cars pull away, the same porch where Grandpa used to call me Little Sprout to help with the tomatoes. The neighborhood app exploded with apologies from neighbors who'd bought Karen's narrative. Mrs. Patterson from next door brought over a tray of pierogies and hugged me so hard my ribs creaked. Your grandparents would be so proud. They were. I could feel it in the way the roses seemed to nod in the breeze. But the war wasn't quite over. My parents still had one desperate card left to play. 3 days later, they came back swinging. Different lawyer, 2 paid witnesses who swore they'd seen me isolating my grandparents, and a local news crew they'd fed a story about elder abuse by a scheming granddaughter. They gathered exactly 500 feet away, restraining order distance, while the reporter practiced her concerned frown. I watched for Grandpa's study, Professor Rothstein beside me. Let them dig their hole deeper, he said. But I was done waiting. I grabbed the banker's box of evidence and walked straight to the legal boundary line. The camera swung toward me. The reporter shoved a microphone in my face. MS. Dawson, care to comment on allegations that you manipulated your grandparents out of their own son's inheritance? I smiled the way Grandma taught me, polite but lethal. Happy to. But first, let's talk facts. I pulled out the tablet. Would you like to see the video of my father trying to guide Grandpa's morphine-dosed hand to sign a new will? Or the bank records of 17 attempts to access accounts while they were still alive? The reporter's eyes lit up like Christmas. My parents' new lawyer tried to jump in, sweating bullets. That's out of context. Context. I held up more papers. 22 years of 0 visits during chemo and dementia, but 17 financial inquiries. paid witnesses who just got $5,000 each via Venmo. Public transactions, by the way. One of the fake witnesses turned and jogged away so fast he nearly tripped over his own lies. Samantha stepped forward, phone still live streaming. You're just bitter because I was raised by two people who chose me every single day while you were raised by people currently committing fraud on camera. I finished. The comments on her stream flipped so fast, it looked like a slot machine. I read from the original, well, my grandparents had filed 5 years earlier, the one before the trust. To our son Robert and his wife Patricia, we leave our forgiveness for their absence and the hope they someday understand love cannot be retroactively purchased. To our granddaughter Emily, we leave the home, the portfolio, and the proof that family is a choice. My mother screamed, an actual guttural scream, and lunged across the 500-foot line. Officer Martinez had her in cuffs before the camera even finished panning. Dad tried to snatch the documents and got the same treatment. Samantha stood frozen, watching her parents arrested live while her influencer dreams died in real time. The news crew stayed. The story that aired that night wasn't the one my parents had sold. The headline read, "Blood may be thicker than water, but legal documents are thicker than both. Granddaughter defends legacy against HOA overreach and family greed." It went viral by morning. 6 months later, the dust had settled in the best possible way. Karen Vance was removed from the board permanently, facing civil suits that drained what little savings she had left after her community service fines were exposed as personal vendettas. My parents pled to probation and hefty restitution. Samantha sent a letter, not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement that therapy was helping her understand how she'd become the person who live-streamed her own family's downfall. I haven't replied yet. Some scars need time. The house feels alive again. Sunday dinners with the neighbors who stood by me. Mrs. Patterson's pierogies, spring rolls from down the street. I started a free legal clinic in the front parlor twice a month, helping seniors fight abusive HOAs and greedy relatives. The portfolio is now $3.7 million and growing. The interest funds scholarships at Temple Law for students focused on elder protection. I'm dating Marcus, a pediatric nurse who gets that family isn't DNA, it's showing up. We planted new roses exactly where Grandma wanted. When they bloomed this spring, I swear, I heard her humming Motown in the kitchen. Last week I found a box in the attic, hundreds of photos of me growing up, and underneath, older pictures of my father as a kid. They never stopped loving him. They just chose to love me more actively. There was a letter too, dated right before Grandpa passed. Dearest Emily, if you're reading this, you've weathered the storm we feared. The money, the house, the things, they're just objects. What we're really leaving you is proof that love isn't passive. It's choice, repeated daily. You were never second best. You were the daughter we chose, and you chose us back. Live boldly. Love actively. The best inheritance isn't what you leave behind. It's what you plant in others to grow. I framed it and hung it where I once watched Karen and my parents get arrested on live TV. It reminds me every day that I didn't just win a legal battle. I defended a love story. Sometimes I drive past my parents' new apartment on the edge of town. They live quietly now, dreams of easy money shattered. I don't hate them. Hate takes energy I'd rather spend on tomatoes and laughter. They're strangers who share DNA. Nothing more. The Dawson Family Trust will outlive all of us, protecting values, not just assets. I've already picked my successor, not by blood, but by the same test my grandparents used. Whoever proves through actions that they understand family is a choice. People ask if I regret how it ended. How could I? I protected the only real parents I ever had. I honored their lifetime of sacrifice with a few months of strength. I proved that the family you choose is the family that counts. Blood may be thicker than water, but love, real love protected by ironclad documents and a little HOA karma, is thicker than both. The house that greed and Karen tried to steal is now a fortress of chosen family, laughter, and roses that bloom exactly the way they were meant to. And somewhere, I know Arthur and Lillian are watching, probably arguing about fertilizer and smiling at their little sprout who grew into an oak strong enough to shade the whole neighborhood. The final chapter didn't come with handcuffs or viral videos. It came quietly on a Sunday morning, exactly like the ones I remembered from childhood. I woke to the sizzle of bacon in Grandma's cast iron skillet, my own hands flipping the Mickey Mouse pancakes this time. Marcus was in the greenhouse with the kids from the scholarship program, teaching them how patience turns tiny seeds into something that feeds people. The neighborhood kids ran through the yard chasing bubbles, laughing the way I once did. Mrs. Patterson knocked with her weekly pierogies. The board voted last night. New covenants, no more selective enforcement. Your grandparents would be dancing in the streets. I hugged her and thought they already are. The investment portfolio ticked up another notch on my phone app. I don't touch the principal. Every dollar of interest goes back into the community. Legal aid for seniors fighting HOAs, scholarships for future lawyers who will protect legacies, and yes, a new Rose Garden fund, so no one ever has to worry about wrong height fines again. Karen Vance? Last I heard, she moved to a condo complex with no HOA. Rumor has it she still sends angry letters to the local paper about lawless neighborhoods. I keep everyone framed in the guest bathroom as a reminder of what happens when power forgets it's supposed to serve, not rule. My parents sent one last envelope last month. No demands, just a single sheet. We were wrong. Therapy is helping us see that. If you ever want to talk, the door is open. I haven't walked through it yet. Some bridges need more than one coat of paint. But I didn't burn it either. Grandpa taught me forgiveness is a choice too, just not one that comes with a U-Haul and a rule book. Samantha actually showed up on my doorstep 2 weeks ago. No camera, no attitude. She looked smaller, older, like the transactional armor had finally cracked. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said quietly. I just wanted to say I get it now. What you were protecting wasn't the house. It was them. She left a small envelope with photos she'd taken as a kid. Me in the background at every forced family visit, always the one holding the camera while they scroll their phones. I cropped you out of everything. I'm sorry. I kept the photos. Added them to the attic box. Healing isn't linear, but it's happening. The best part? The house is full again. Not with ghosts or grudges, but with life. Sunday dinners stretch long into the evening. Kids learn to knit in the library the way Grandma taught me. I read Dickens aloud the way Grandpa did. And every time I hit a particularly dramatic line, the whole table cheers like it's a sporting event. Marcus proposed last month in the greenhouse, down on one knee among the tomato vines. I want to build what your grandparents built, he said. Not just a house. A home that chooses people every day. I said yes before he finished the sentence. We're planning the wedding for next spring, right when the new roses hit full bloom. The invitations will be simple. You're invited because you showed up. No blood required. Sometimes at night, I sit at Grandpa's desk and reread that final letter. The best inheritance isn't what you leave behind. It's what you plant in others to grow. I look out at the yard where children who aren't mine by blood are learning to garden. Neighbors who chose to stand with me are laughing over coffee, and a man who understands chosen family is planning a future beside me. The portfolio is safe. The house is safe. But more importantly, the love is safe, protected, nurtured, and spreading like those tomato vines that just keep giving year after year. The HOA Karen and my greedy parents try to strip everything my grandparents built. They thought I was just a grieving granddaughter, too broken to fight. They were wrong. I didn't just win. I kept the promise I made at Grandma's grave. I filled the house with laughter again. I planted the seeds they gave me and watched them grow into something stronger than any covenant, thicker than any blood, and far more beautiful than any rulebook could ever understand. And every time a new neighbor waves from across the street, every time a kid runs through the yard shouting Mickey Mouse pancakes, every time the roses bloom exactly the right height, I hear Grandpa's voice on the wind. Everything worthwhile takes time. Little sprout. Remember that. I do, Grandpa. Every single day. The $3.4 million is still growing, but the real wealth? It's in the laughter echoing through rooms that once held only grief. It's in the chosen family that now calls this house home. It's in the proof that love, fiercely protected, actively chosen, and never for sale, is the only legacy that truly lasts. Blood may be thicker than water. HOA rules may try to choke you. But the family you choose, the love you defend with every legal tool and every ounce of patience, that's thicker than both. And it's blooming right here in the house that greed couldn't steal and Karen couldn't rule. Thanks for listening to my story. Drop in the comments. Have you ever fought an HOA Karen or stood up to family who only showed up when money was involved? Let's talk about chosen families versus blood. I read every single one. And remember, keep your cameras rolling, your documents ironclad, and your roses blooming exactly the height you damn well please. See you in the next neighborhood drama. Stay fierce.